This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
I think it's a fungus who has infected an AI or something like that.
And asking us, is there life beyond this universe?
It's really silly, but it's a lot of fun.
I read this book in 2016, and I still think about it.
It's Monday, everyone, and it is a hot one out there, just a few days from the official start of summer. So today, we're devoting the show to talking about summer reads, books that are just right for higher temps, and all the places you'll be diving into titles new, beloved, and unexpectedly refreshing this season. Here to talk with us about their picks for summer 2024, we have two year-round professional bookworms from local libraries. First, we have Tammy Albohaire, who's with the St. Louis County Library at the Parkview branch. Tammy, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Ted Reidy, who's material selector at St. Louis Public Library. Ted, welcome back to you too.
Thank you so much.
And we want to invite you to the conversation. On Facebook, Courtney had recommended Moon Witch Spider King by Marlon James. She says it's utterly gripping. And on Instagram, Pat suggests Sure I'll Join Your Cult by Maria Bamford. What books are you reading this summer? Share your best beach, park, pool, and AC-controlled reads with us. Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can email us at talk@stlpr.org. You can message us also on Instagram or X. Find us at STL on air. So let's begin with a quintessential summer read by each of your definitions. Tammy, tell us, what is the quintessential read for summer?
In these modern times, I'm going to go with romance.
Okay.
Everybody's reading rom-coms and romance, and contemporary romance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with a nice summer romance.
And which of the books on your list would you recommend?
Well, the first one, I just finished it. This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. It's one of the hottest books out now. A New York Times bestseller. One of Amazon's top romance books. I just read it with my virtual book club, The Spine Collectors.
Oh.
So it's good. It's Soledad Barnes. Her husband does the unthinkable, and so she has to rebuild her life with her and her children. So it's a great read, and it's going to be made into a TV series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you have described this book as being a modern romance. What makes it modern?
I think what makes it modern is because a lot of people, you find a lot of ladies who read books now, they have what you call book boyfriends. And so when you read this book, you're going to find out that you're going to have a book boyfriend by the end.
Okay.
So I think it's very modern in that. It takes place in modern times, like 2013,
Right.
2014. So that was a few years ago, but I think it's still modern, and it deals with a lot of modern, topics.
Okay. And before we leave this, by book boyfriend, do you mean a boyfriend from a book that everybody wants as their boyfriend?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to clarify.
Ladies, we have book boyfriends now, and so when you read this one, you're gonna find immediately the book is so good you can literally see him, and he's gonna be your book boyfriend.
Okay. So Ted, for you, what is the quintessential summer read from your perspective?
So never been a huge fan of the typical summer reads for myself, of course. But this year there's a book by Rachel Cusk called Parade, and that's in my style of a preferred summer read.
Okay.
So it's a very meditative book where each chapter you kind of want to put it down and just sit and think for a while. And I like that during the summer because you got the time, you can sit outside. Maybe not today. I don't want to go outside at all today,
Right.
but just something that you can use the space that you have in summer to really think about and sort of chew on.
Mm-hmm. And what is some of the subject matter that Parade covers?
I'll be honest, it's hard to describe. It's kind of hard to even think about, but it's covers a series of different people. Most of them are artists in some way, that something slightly mystical is happening to them. most of the characters are named G. There's each new story is the character's named just G. One is a woman cannot paint things right side up. She's a painter, and everything she paints turns upside down. It causes like a lot of rifts in her relationships professionally. And it's just stuff like that. That's sort of, it's hard to say what it's about, but it gives you something to think about for a while. And that's what I always like in that space of the summer.
So that's Parade by Rachel Cusk. And Tammy, your quintessential read was This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. So something that is also associated with the summer is vacation. Can you tell us about a book, Ted, that puts us in a very particular place?
Yes. So James by Percival Everett. This one has been out for a little while, and it really took off in popularity after it released. It's a retelling of the retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's perspective, which is a book I read actually going down the river with my grandpa when I was a little boy. So revisiting that as an adult from certainly a more adult perspective has been really interesting. It's funny, it's gripping, it's really got a lot of everything, and I think if you're writing a book that's retelling Huckleberry Finn, you got to make sure you know what you're doing, and it holds up to the original. I mean, it's really amazing. I would suggest it to everybody.
Tammy, you were nodding.
No, yes, that's a great book. Yeah, that's a great pick. Yep, that's a great book. Yeah.
What was it about the book that you enjoyed so much?
I just like the retelling of it, and I like books that take you to a place. Yeah. And this one does just that.
Yeah, it takes you to a place, and especially if you've read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, it's a place you've been before, but it gives you another perspective of that place. So it's really interesting, and I think it's something that's like something that should be included in like necessary reading.
Required reading.
Yeah,
right,
required reading. Yeah,
so
exactly.
Same place can have a different feel depending on who's looking at it. Again, that was James by Percival Everett. Tammy, for your part, a book that takes us to a really distinct locale.
I think I'm going to go with a lot of people used to read Harlequin romances, so I'm going to stick in the same vein, and I'm going to choose Crash Landing. It takes place in the mountains in the west, and there's a paramedic, Gwen, and she is on a plane and it crashes with an undercover DEA agent, and so they're on the run in the wilderness in the west. Right. So it takes you right to that place, and you're there with them, and they're literally running for their lives while trying to survive in the wilderness. And
that is a Harlequin romance.
Yes, a Harlequin romance. We don't talk about those a lot, but I think they're making a comeback.
Right.
They are, yeah.
They are. Easy for the summer, pocket, you can put it in your bag. Read it at the beach. It's easy to read, easy to carry. I think they're making a comeback.
Okay, so that's Crash Landing by Janice K. Johnson. And Ted, you're saying yes, there's been a comeback of the Harlequin romances.
those. So when Harlequin is sort of the publisher, and they make these books that are a little bit smaller than a typical book, and they're made just like Tammy said. They're made to put it in your tote bag, your beach bag, to go to the beach, read. And I have noticed there's an uptick in these kinds of romance novels. They're especially romance novels, but they come in other forms too.
Yeah, they come in other forms. This is like a romantic thriller.
Yeah.
So if you like adventure and romance, it combines both of them.
Right, both of
Great
those
book.
genres.
Quick read, real easy to read.
Yeah,
real quick.
Yeah. It's something you could knock out in vacation, no problem.
Right.
Yeah, little vacation.
That
read.
sounds good to me. So another aspect of travel is time travel, and the way that people can move through time, either backward or forward, is something that I'd like to hear a little bit about too. Tammy, is there a pick on your list that kind of answers that call?
I think I'm going to go with baseball's leading lady, Effa Manley, and the rise and fall of the Negro Leagues, being that the Negro Leagues are now being recognized by the MLB. It takes you, again, it time travels. It's a great book, and a lot of people didn't know about Effa Manley. So this is it's a great book. It's a great history lesson, and it takes you to the Negro Leagues, but it also brings you forward to this time. So I think that's a great time travel book.
Right. And again, that is Baseball's Leading Lady, Effa Manley, and the Rise and Fall of the Negro Leagues. And that's a 2021 book by Andrea Williams. Ted, time travel.
I've got several things on my list that have something to do with that, but I think I'm going to take a page from Tammy's book and use one of my nonfiction picks. Traveling on the Path of Joni Mitchell. We were actually just talking about this in the green room.
Oh, okay.
It's a biography of Joni Mitchell, which, like the name Traveling, like I don't remember the name of the song. It's not Traveling, but she says it a lot in the song. It takes you through her whole life, not only time-wise, but also place-wise, all the places she's been. It's really great. As a huge fan of folk music, and especially Joni Mitchell, it was really a pleasure to read.
Yeah.
Is there something about biographies during the summer that's
I
kind of
think
vicarious,
so.
maybe?
Yeah. I think especially because summer is a time when I think people who maybe aren't reading year-round, like Tammy and I, like to dig into a book, and biographies are just always popular and they're timely. And so when people want to read something that somebody else is reading, I think a biography is a great pick.
So before we came into the studio, and then you were just mentioning, Tammy, a virtual book club. Now, one of the things that, at least for me in the summer, I have a little bit more time to spend with people, and I love to discuss what I'm reading or watching with others. Among the books on your list, Tammy, what would you recommend maybe for someone who is responsible for either choosing a book club book or, one that would be good for somebody who wants to start a book club over the summer?
I think I'm going to go with Glory B by Danielle Arsenault. Glory is a funny character. She's a small-time bookie, so that alone is funny. And she runs her business from a local coffee shop. So her best friend is found murdered in her apartment, and so the police think it's suicide, but Glory knows that it's not suicide. So she goes on a quest to find her best friend's killer.
Right.
So it's serious yet it's funny, and you're gonna love Glory. And it's the first book in a series. So that book club could choose that book, and maybe when the next book comes out, they could read other books and then come back and read those books in a series. People like series books.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great pick too, because you can discuss with your book club participants, like, what do you think happened? Like,
Right.
And get different perspectives. I love being able to do that when it's a mystery or, even just an element of mystery in a book, being able to see what other people think and what their guesses are.
Right. And that title again is Glory B by Danielle Arsenault. So as far as the series part of it, Ted, is there a book among the ones on your list for this summer that will put people in the middle of a series?
Yes. So it'll put people in the middle of a series, but as so far it's been a pretty slow series coming out. It's been years between these books. But the title is My Favorite Thing is Monsters. It's by, I might be pronouncing this name wrong, Emile Ferris. It's semi-autobiographical, but it's also fantastical. It's a graphic novel about the author, Emile Ferris's life living in Chicago in the 1960s when somebody in the apartment next to her dies. She's a little girl. She's also a huge fan of the classic monsters like Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, stuff like that. So the one that just recently came out, I believe it just hit the shelves at the City Library, but I could be wrong, is the sequel. It's number 2. And it's really great. It's introspective. It's a period piece. It has this incredible art that looks like it was drawn with colored pencils on notebook paper, like you would draw when you were a little kid. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's it's a unique thing in its field, and the artwork is beautiful. So.
And there's My Favorite Thing is Monsters, and that's book 2 by Emile Ferris. It is a graphic novel and in the horror genre, right?
Yes, it's horror. It's a little bit of mystery, and then it's also a little autobiographical. It's in a lot of genres, but I think if you like any of them, you'll enjoy it.
And again, we want to remind you that we want to hear from you. What books are you reading this summer? We'd like you to share your best beach reads or park, pool, wherever you're spending your time this summer. share those titles with us. Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. You can email us at talk@stlpr.org or message us on Instagram or X. You can find us at STL On Air. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome back. We're discussing the best books published in 2024 so far, as well as some all-time favorite summer reads with Ted Reidy of St. Louis Public Library and Tammy Albohaire of St. Louis County Library. We've also had submissions via email and social media. Kurt wrote to us and said he's been reading his way through the joint winners of the Nebula and Hugo Awards. His summer goal is to read The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin and Network Effect by Martha Wells. Stone Sky is the last part of the Broken Earth trilogy, and Network Effect is part 5 of 7 in the Murderbot Diaries. And Kurt's also been working his way through all of the Dune sequel books. Kurt also adds that he gets most of his books through St. Louis Public Library in digital format and reads most of them on Kindle, and that every once in a while he's got to buy a book if the library doesn't have it, but at least once a book has been requested and they've gotten a copy of it, and that was a really cool thing. Now, Fontella Bradford is one of our colleagues here at St. Louis Public Radio. She's currently reading Death's End, which is the last book in Liu Cixin's 3 Body Problem series, which I think many people will recognize from the Netflix series that's on. And she wanted to read the books before watching that series because Netflix changed so much about them. Fontella says, although I do approve of their interpretation of the headsets, which were sick, the series has been called The War of the Worlds for the 21st Century. And just overall, Fontella feels it's brilliant. Now, both Kurt and Fontella brought up series that have been adapted by Hollywood, Dune and 3 Body Problem. And Tammy, you mentioned earlier that one of the books that you brought up is going to be made into a TV series, right?
Right. And I have another one, Children of Anguish and Anarchy, by Tomi Adeyemi. This is one of the hottest books of the summer. This is the 3rd book in the Orisha series. And her first book, Children of Blood and Bone, is being made into a movie. And this one is set to be made into a movie, too. And she's coming to the county library to the Post-Event Center June 30th.
Oh, okay.
So that's going to be great. People love, if you're the sci-fi fantasy, people love her books. They love her books.
And again, that's Children of Anguish and Anarchy by Tomi Adeyemi, and a June 30th event at the St. Louis County Library. And this is West African mythology?
Yes, West African mythology. And this is it. Like, she has to save her people. She meets her captor in this book, and she has to save her people. This is the last book in the series.
Yeah.
So this is it.
This is it, right? So Ted, you were nodding and also audibly
This is
responding.
another one. This is another one that I was very close to including on my list. That series has been really great. I really appreciate the amount of sci-fi and fantasy. I'm a huge sci-fi and fantasy fan. I've appreciated how much of that is coming from non-European backgrounds because, for years and years, that was all that there was.
Right.
And so when it takes from these mythologies and stuff that I know nothing about, it's almost like you get a little extra from it because it's based on stuff that I don't know anything about. So I get to add to my list of references. And so, I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah. And do you think that there is something to these books that can also be watched, interpreted for the screen that makes them especially appealing for summertime?
I think, yeah, because these types of books typically have very rich visual descriptions, and like I said, you can kind of daydream about them, really get into the weeds and think about like, what would this look like? And then when the movie comes out, maybe you're disappointed, maybe you're really happy. So you never know how somebody else can interpret these things.
Right. We want to hear from you too. What books are you reading this summer, whether they're sci-fi or other genres? Share your best beach reads with us. Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK, or email us at talk@stlpr.org. You can also message us on Instagram or X, and you can find us at STL On Air. Ted, are there any trends that you've noticed in the publishing world over the years so far that would make their way into what it is people are wanting to read right now?
I think, like I said, that stuff of things that come from a background that are not Eurocentric are getting really popular. It's just something new, you know. We've got all these amazing cultures, I guess, from all over the world that people haven't been exposed to and can be brought to the screen. Representation of all these things that, you know, people don't experience. I think really that's what I'm most excited by, is being able to see different mythologies, different cultures, different music, even different art and stuff that's being represented on the big screen in the big like forefront of culture.
Right. And as far as images go, you have another graphic novel that is on your list. Tell us about that book.
So this is titled The Puerto Rican War, A Graphic History. It's by John Vasquez Mejias. It's a graphic novel telling of the 1950s Puerto Rican nationalist revolution. And the art in this is not typical graphic novel. It's carved woodblock prints for almost all of it. It is stunning to look at. It's really something that you have to hold in your hands. I know we've got some copies floating around if you want to check them out. But it's really interesting, and the story it's based on true events, but they add a lot of like a little more interpretational stuff, like the ghosts of former revolutionaries talking to present ones, and really something that I think you need to get your hands on to appreciate fully.
Is that a title that you're familiar with?
That's not a title that I'm familiar with, but it sounds interesting. Yeah.
And again, the title is The Puerto Rican War, A Graphic History, and that is a 2024 book by John Vasquez Mejias, a graphic novel and history. So on that note of a book with lots of imagery, Kate says, I just finished H is for Hope by New Yorker journalist Elizabeth Colbert. It's a really beautifully illustrated A through Z explainer of climate change and potential solutions that's new this year. What books are you reading this summer? Be sure to share those with us. Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Speaking of science, there's a nonfiction book that is on your list, Tammy, and it sounds like one that gives you a lot to think about here and elsewhere.
Right.
Tell us about what that elsewhere is.
I just would like to say I met her last year. She came to the Science Center, and it was wonderful. She gave a great presentation. It's Life on Other Planets by Dr. Mawa Shields. She was told that she didn't belong into a astrophysics PhD program, so she then turned to acting, and she studied acting for 10 years. And then, but she had a day job at NASA, so she just couldn't, she had to follow her calling. So she ended up getting her PhD in astrophysics and to study the stars and asking us, is there life beyond this universe? So that's what she studies. And she also has a girls program called the Rising Star Girls. And it combines art and science for middle school girls. So she was wonderful. And it's a wonderful book. It's a memoir. It's a beautiful book. The cover is even beautiful. And so it was just great. She was great.
And that's Dr. Aomawa
Shields.
And the book's title is Life on Other Planets, and that's a 2023 book. Is that available in paperback, or is this a hardcover?
This is a hard copy.
Okay.
This is a hardback.
Yeah. Among the books that you've seen come through the library, Ted, ones that you can only get in a particular form, like hardcover, maybe only paperback. I like paperback books during the summertime because they're so easily transportable. Are there any books on your list that sort of fall into?
So I believe so. Typically, when we purchase books, we try to get hardcovers because they last longer to the rigors of being passed around through people all over the city. But a lot of times, nonfiction books come in primarily paperback. So one of the books on my list, Cull of the Wild, that's Cull, Cull, by Hugh Warwick. It's an ecologist sort of just discussing the effects that humans have had on the environment and how we can't just say, okay, we shouldn't have messed with nature. We're not going to, do anything. No more hands off. That doesn't really work. He talks a little bit about hunting, especially dealing with invasive species. Warwick is British, and I grew up in rural Missouri, so very different places. But I'm very familiar with the practice of hunting, especially hunting for population control and deer and stuff like that. So it can be hard to say, like, you love nature, you want to protect it, and sometimes, Warwick argues, you might have to do some unpleasant things to protect that nature, like hunting deer to do population control. He focuses more on invasive species. I believe the cover is 2 squirrels, and one is super invasive, and the other is natural, and the invasive one took out I don't think it was a squirrel, it was another. Sorry, it's been a while. But,
right.
But it's really interesting, and it comes from a really neutral perspective of, everybody wants what's best for nature, but how do we get there? What steps do we take? What steps don't we take?
And again, that's Cull of the Wild, Cull, Killing in the Name of Conservation by Hugh Warwick. Sarah also wrote on X that she finished a book by someone who is also across the pond, Colm Tolbein, and it's called Long Island, and Sarah loved it. So we've talked a little bit about writers from outside the U.S. Are there any others on your list, Tammy?
That are outside of the U.S. I don't think I have any that are outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
But I have, read authors that are outside of the U.S. I think it gives us definitely a different perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much demand are you seeing for that? Do you have patrons coming in and asking specifically for books who are written, books that are written by authors who either live outside the United States or from diverse perspectives?
Yeah, definitely from diverse perspectives. We have an uptick of Hispanic patrons coming in, so they're definitely asking for books from different perspectives and diverse perspectives.
Yeah, I think in St. Louis we're sort of lucky that we have such a diverse community that just by necessity, our libraries have to carry diverse materials.
Right.
If I'm buying what people want to read, I just am buying diverse materials. So, frankly, we don't always have to worry about it when we're making our cards.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't. It's there.
We give people what they want, and what they want is
and
diversity.
What they want. They want diversity, definitely.
So let's bring it very local and talk about the recommendations that you have that have been written by people who live right here in St. Louis. Ted, share one of those with us.
Absolutely. So I've actually been speaking to the author about this to get some books for all of our libraries. It's titled 7 Years in the City by Janet Mumm. Some of you might recognize that title. She has created the popular A Year in the City calendars for 7 years now. Each month shows a beautiful vector drawing of some place in the city of St. Louis. And the book has each of these from all 7 years, so not great at math, not going to try and count that up right now. I think there's some bonus ones in there too, but there's with a little story either about like her experience with that or something like that. And it's I've seen the images, it's really beautiful. It has a map of all the places, so if you have the book, you can go and look. It's all across St. Louis, north, south, east, west, the county. And yeah, I think it would be a really fantastic gift to get anybody who loves St. Louis, but especially a new transplant so they can see, some of these more hidden spots. And some of them, they're not always like a beautiful scene. Sometimes it's just a street that you can have a memory on.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, it's been really nice.
And Tammy, you have one also.
It's St. Louis Sound, an illustrated timeline by Steve Pick and Amanda Doyle. This is I say it's the perfect coffee table book. So if you invite your friends over in the summer, you all can look through this book, and it's just like a musical timeline of St. Louis. And I love it. The pictures are great. The illustrations are great. I just love this book. It's perfect for, St. Louis music lovers, definitely.
So that's St. Louis Sound, an illustrated timeline by Steve Pick with Amanda E. Doyle. And Ted, your recommendation was 7 Years in the City by Janet Mum. We're going to take a very quick break here, but we will be back shortly to continue this conversation about summer reads for 2024. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Welcome back. Now, before the break, we were talking about local picks, and each of you have one more each. And there was the one that you gave, Tammy, about St. Louis Sound. And the other local pick that you have, Ted, also has to do with sound.
Yes. So my second local pick is Subterranean by Design by Josh Levi. Josh Levi is a local artist, musician, designer who wrote this book about his experiences in the American DIY music scene. It's mostly about St. Louis, as Josh is a St. Louis local, but there's other cities included, and it's got, pictures, scans of flyers. There's a lot of essays about his time in this scene. And it's really interesting. It's inspirational because you have all these pictures of these people who came together in, somebody's basement, somebody's backyard, a warehouse, and made a venue and had some music, had some fun. A lot of fun, judging by some of the pictures. But it's really interesting, and it's something that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of, this DIY music scene. So it's something that I think people should check out, and you'll definitely learn something new about, stuff that's still going on now. Even.
Right. So then it does address what's happening today, as well as providing a retrospective.
Exactly, yes. And again, it's really just incredibly well put together. You can tell that this was sort of a magnum opus for Josh Levi, putting together all this material from years and years. And yeah, it's really cool. I'm excited that we were able to get our hands on it.
And again, that is Subterranean by Design, 2023 book by Josh Levi. Fun fact, Josh has been a guest on our show to talk about experimental music, as has been Amanda Doyle. She's been on the show a number of times.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And so, Tammy, your second pick for a local book is indeed very local.
Yes, it's very, very local. It's Growing Up St. Louis by Jim Merkel. It's a combination of stories from St. Louisans. It's broken down into decades. So if you love nostalgia, this book is for you. And I love nostalgia. So I really enjoy reading it. And as I was reading it, I think it's a couple of people in there that I know. Like I ran across, oh man, I was like, look at this.
Wow.
So it was a great read. It's just like, I love nostalgia. And I think people really like nostalgia now.
Right.
It's a big thing, people are looking in the past. So I think it's just great. I think it's a great book. It's a paperback, easy to carry, and people love local. I love reading about my hometown.
I'm familiar with that book as well, and it really is just great to be able to it's like talking to a new person you meet at a grocery store or bus stop, something like that. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, that book is Growing Up St. Louis by Jim Merkel. Now, let's talk a little bit more about music, because St. Louis is known as a music place. And one of the books on your list, Ted, is about hip hop.
Yes. So Hip Hop is History by Questlove. It's a great history of an art form that is still growing every single day. There's new stuff there. And Questlove, if people aren't familiar, is the drummer for the band The Roots, who are, a pillar of the hip hop community. And he has a really great picture and a really singular picture of what hip hop was, what it is now, how it became that way. And in more than just a sense of the music, but also the culture that it sprang from, the cultures that it's influenced. And it's just a sort of fun, breezy read as well. Honestly, you get to the end of it, it doesn't feel like you've learned that much, but you have.
Right.
So I would recommend that to anybody, people who are huge fans, people who are not familiar with it at all. It's really great.
And again, that is Questlove's book, Hip Hop is History, a music and culture pick for this summer. We had Robert in DePere who emailed us to say that since May, he's finished several books on his Kindle. River Horse by William Least Heat Moon, which is a story of the author's journey in a small boat from New York City to Astoria, Oregon. World on the Brink by Dmitry Alperovich, which is an analysis of threats posed by the global economic and technological realignment and the rise of Chinese power, and A Fever in the Heartland by Timothy Egan, which is about the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s and the influence of a charismatic con man, David Curtis Stevenson. So this gets to a point that we had kind of touched on earlier, which is that summer reads are not necessarily light. So when you are going to give a recommendation to someone who wants a meaty book, what would you recommend, Tammy?
A meaty book. I tell you, I read this book in 2016 and I still think about it, and that's Burn, Baby, Burn by Meg Medina. It takes place in 1977 in New York City during the Son of Sam, who was a serial killer. And it's about Nora. She's getting ready to turn 18, and it's just a lot of things going on. And during the summer of 77, there is a blackout in New York City. So she has to deal with that. She has to deal with her brother, who is he's just going wild. Her mom, who is late on the rent. So she's dealing with a lot of things. And she has a boyfriend. So she's just trying to face her fears and grow up. So I think that's a meaty book. It's heavy, but it's a good book.
Right.
It's a good book. Again, we always talk about place. It puts you right in New York City in 1977.
Again, that is Burn, Baby, Burn by Meg Medina. And I think that Tammy gets to a point that I always like to make about YA, and that is that it may be written for a young adult audience, but really it's something to digest for anybody of any age. So it's great to have that kind of a recommendation. We also had Galen share with us on Instagram that their summer reading pick is 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. Have you noticed, either of you, that more patrons are coming in looking for context on global events?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think especially the Israel-Palestine conflict. I take care of the suggested purchases at the St. Louis Public Library, and I have noticed so many requests for books on that topic. There's even, I believe it doesn't come out for another couple months, but there's a fiction book based on in Gaza called The Long Walk from Gaza. I was just reading the review before I came here, so it's fresh in my mind. But it seems like world events, especially world events that seem like something big happened, but there's all this history behind it. People are interested in learning about that history, trying to educate themselves, and trying to find different perspectives on it.
So one of the other things I think about summer is that it does give you a little bit more time to chew over things that maybe you don't have the capacity for during the year, but not everyone has the luxury of that time. I mean, vacation only exists for those who are lucky enough to be in a position where that sort of time is afforded. Is there a book on your list, or maybe not on your list, Tammy, but one in your mind that you recommend to people who might not have a big chunk of time, but are able to sort of devote a little bit of time here and there?
This book is heavy, but it's the best book that I've read this year. And it's not on my list. I didn't put it on there because of the heaviness of it. Mm-hmm. But when I say it's the best book I've read this year, it's Leaving Atlanta by Tayari Jones.
Okay.
And it's about the Atlanta child murders in the 80s. And it's told from the perspective of the children. And when I say it was just phenomenal. It was her first novel, I believe. Mm-hmm. It came out published in 2011. And I ran across it and I couldn't put it down. I read it in like 2 days. I just couldn't put it down. And it gives you a perspective from the children. A lot of times during that time, you didn't hear a lot of the children's voices, but it comes from that perspective. And it's just a wonderful book.
Mm-hmm. And that's one you're familiar with?
Yeah. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard about it. And I do think it's so interesting to tell it from the perspective of a child, because we do have so many of these true crime books, and it's from this perspective of the perpetrator.
Right, or the detective.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think especially through the eyes of a child, you can really get a new sense of pathos, really, for what's really going on.
Right. So we have Kathleen, who is calling from Wildwood. Kathleen, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Well, I just wanted to recommend Lisa Scodeline. It's her new book, and it's called Loyalty. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting book because, anyway, she's a really great author. I'm sure that the people that you have with you on your show would recognize who this is.
Yes.
She. This is about the beginning of the mafia in Palermo, and it's set up so that there's so many characters that she has a list of characters at the beginning of the chapters, so you can keep track of it.
Right.
I love that.
But one of the things that I love is that, Nelson DeMille, he's one of my favorite, and he loved this book. He just couldn't say enough about it. So anyway, that's my recommendation.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for calling. And that's, again, by Lisa Scodeline. And the name of the book is Loyalty, about the mafia in Sicily. We also heard from Teresa, who says The Flower Sisters by Michelle Collins Anderson was so very good. A bonus, Michelle happens to live around the corner in Tower Grove East, the local author.
Wow.
Check it out. So, introducing. This is great. So the books that we've been talking about are pretty easily accessible through the library. Here's one that may be a question that you don't have an answer for on the list in front of you. Are there any books that are hard to get that seem to be coming up on people's radars, not necessarily limited to interest for this summer, but over the past year? Ted?
That's actually a good question. I think something that is can be hard to find are older YA books, like we were talking about, because they are for everybody. But they're printed, and then that run, the people that read them then grow up. Or children's books, and they're like, "Wow, I'd really love to read this book again. I wonder if I can find it." And they put in a request, and it can just be hard to find a copy, a new copy. We try not to buy used copies when we can help it. So.
Okay.
Stuff like that. Subterranean by Design, the book I mentioned earlier, we were only able to just get it because the first run was Kickstarter exclusive. So there's just stuff like that where somebody really wants us to try and get a hold of it, and I'm like, I'm trying so hard, and I just can't find a way for us to get it.
Yeah.
So it's nice when something comes back around in a new print, and I can get it. I can let the customer know, and it feels good.
Because sometimes we have. It's no longer in print, but it's on it's electronic.
Right.
And a lot of older patrons really don't want electronic. They want the book. So we have that.
And myself.
We have that.
Yes,
right. We
me
have
too.
that. We have that issue sometimes. Rare, not often, but a lot of them are out of print and they're electronic, and they want the printed copy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've found that is happening especially with audiobooks, as a lot of publishers are just totally skipping audiobook on CDs and going straight to the e-audiobook format.
To the e-audio format.
Right. Well, something that hopefully does not change over time is how people like to enjoy laughter. And one of the books on your list, Tammy, is one that you chose because it is hilarious. So tell us about that book.
I'm laughing now about it. It's so funny. We Are Never Meeting in Real Life by Samantha Irby. It's a collection of essays. She talks about everything, but it comes from a lighthearted, funny perspective. And I think it's just great. It's a great summer read. And she has a few other books, but this book is great. The cover is great. It's a cat on the cover with his hair flying out. It's just a great book, and I really enjoyed it. It's fun. It's again, I like lighthearted. In the summer, you want heavy, but you also want to have something lighthearted.
Something to
It's
balance.
nice to have a mix.
It's like to have a mix, a balance. You need that balance.
Vegetables and candy.
Book, yeah, right. This book gives you that balance.
So again, that is a Samantha Irby book. It is essays and memoir and humor. We Are Never Meeting in Real Life. Are there any books that you go to for laughs, Ted?
There are none, I don't think, on my list this time, although one a little bit. So Moonbound is by Robin Sloan. It's a sort of mix of fantasy and sci-fi. I haven't read the whole thing because it just came out, but I read the first couple chapters. And it really reminded me of the original Wizard of Oz books, I don't know if anybody ever read these. I have vivid memories of going to the library in my hometown with my mom, reading these books with all these fantastical creatures and weird people. And it really reminds me of that, where it's this incredibly unique world with all these crazy characters. But it does a good job of taking itself seriously, but knowing what it is. It's an off-kilter, fun book. I think I wrote friendly. It really comes across as a friendly book.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's narrated by, I think it's a fungus who has infected an AI or something like that.
Oh, wow.
It's really silly, but it's a lot of fun, and it's, yeah. Oh, and it has a fantastic cover.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of judging a book by its cover.
Okay.
So am I. I love covers. That's what grabs me.
Yeah.
The covers are very important.
And
They are.
especially for sci-fi and fantasy, we've had these incredible covers from years and years ago, and it's nice when there's still a really beautiful illustrated cover. So look for it on the shelves.
And
even
is
if you
that a
don't read it.
YA?
I'm not sure. I think we have it in adult, but
Okay.
I think it's in the eye of the beholder too.
Right. It's
Yeah.
good for everybody. So in the last minute, tell us very quickly about one of the books on your list that we didn't get to talk about and why it is other people should read it. Ted?
Absolutely. So Beautiful Days by Zach Williams. It's his debut book of short stories. It's fantastic. I think one of them was originally published in The New Yorker, which is where I read it. And it's these stories that are sort of ambiguous and kind of horror stories, but kind of not. They really leave a lot of room for the reader to interpret how to feel about them. And I think it's wonderful. I think that's a book that I would love to have a book club on to see what other people get from it.
Again, that is Beautiful Days by Zach Williams. That's Z-A-C-H, Zach. And Tammy.
And mine would be Mistakes We Never Make by Hannah Brown. Emma and Finn, they aren't getting along, but their mutual friends are getting married, but the bride goes missing. So they take off in a sports car hoping to find her and see if they can salvage the marriage and, hopefully salvage their relationship. So that's a fun one. Again, summer read, lighthearted. That's one I recommend.
Right. And who doesn't want to read about being in a sports car?
Right.
That's Mistakes We Never Made by Hannah Brown. Tammy Albohaire is St. Louis County Library Associate at the Parkview Branch, and Ted Reidy is Material Selector at St. Louis Public Library. Ted and Tammy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
This episode was produced by Emily Woodbury.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.